You have carried so much for so long, and most of it was never yours to carry. From the earliest days you can remember, you felt the pain in the room before anyone spoke of it. You noticed the unspoken tension between your parents, the sadness behind your friend's smile, the quiet frustration in your teacher's voice. You felt all of it as if it belonged to you. While other children ran free, you were already holding invisible weights. You didn't have words for it then, but you knew one thing: you were different. As you grew older, this difference became both a blessing and a curse. People trusted you, often without knowing why. They poured their secrets into your open heart, drawn to your compassion like moths to a flame. And you carried their stories with tenderness, because you could not bear to see anyone feel alone. But what no one saw was what it cost you. The sleepless nights replaying conversations in your head. The way you absorbed people's anger like it was your fault. The way you sacrificed your own peace just to give someone else a moment of relief. Empaths are the silent healers of this world. But being one often means you are praised for your kindness while quietly drowning in your own exhaustion. And somewhere along the way, you began to believe that this was your role. That your purpose was to be the strong one, the understanding one, the one who holds it all together. And when you dared to want something for yourself, the guilt crept in, whispering that you were selfish, that you were abandoning others. But here is the truth you have long needed to hear. It is not selfish to choose yourself. It is survival. Carl Jung once wrote that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. For empaths, that darkness is the shadow of self-abandonment. The part of you that constantly says yes when your soul is screaming no. The part of you that silences your needs so others will not feel discomfort. The part of you that mistakes being needed for being loved. Until this shadow is faced, you will keep repeating this cycle of overgiving, overcaring, oversacrificing, and quietly breaking inside. But when an empath awakens, everything changes. It begins slowly, almost like a whisper. You start to notice the ways you betray yourself. You notice the heaviness in your body after saying yes when you wanted to say no. You notice how drained you feel around certain people who never give back what you offer. You notice the quiet grief of realizing you have spent years putting yourself last. And though it hurts to see it, this awareness is the first step toward freedom. Choosing yourself does not mean closing your heart. It means learning how to love without losing yourself. It means understanding that boundaries are not walls, they are doors. Doors that allow you to decide who enters your life, how long they stay, and how much access they have to your energy. At first, boundaries feel terrifying. You worry people will leave. You fear they will call you selfish, or worse, unloving. And some people might. Because when you stop playing the role of endless giver, it forces them to face their own patterns. But those who truly value you will stay. They will learn to respect you in a new way. They will see that your love is still there, but it is healthier, steadier, and more real than before. As you learn to choose yourself, something else begins to happen. You meet parts of yourself you had buried for years. Jung called this the shadow, but really it is simply the parts of you that long for expression, but were silenced by fear. The anger you never voiced because you wanted to keep the peace. The desires you hid because you were told they were too much. The grief you carried in silence because you didn't want to burden anyone else. All of it begins to rise. And though it is uncomfortable, it is also liberating. Because every emotion you reclaim brings you closer to wholeness. You begin to see that empathy without boundaries is not love, it is self-erasure. But empathy with awareness, with choice, becomes the purest form of love. You no longer give because you have to. You give because you want to. And in that freedom, your love becomes deeper, more powerful, more radiant than ever before. And something beautiful happens. People begin to experience you differently. They feel the steadiness of your energy. They sense the quiet strength beneath your softness. They respect you, not just for what you give, but for the way you honor yourself. And slowly you notice that you are no longer just surviving as an empath, you are thriving. This is the Jungian awakening. The process of individuation. The journey of becoming your whole self. It is the realization that you are not just a mirror for other people's emotions, but a soul with your own light. That you are not just the healer of others, but also the healer of yourself. And that the most profound act of love you can ever give the world is to love yourself enough to remain whole. So when you finally choose yourself, the burden you have carried for so long begins to fall away. The endless cycles of exhaustion, guilt, and silent suffering begin to break. And in their place, you find a calm strength, a steady flame, a freedom you never thought was possible. You are still an empath. You are still sensitive, still compassionate, still deeply connected to the emotions around you. But now you are also something more. You are awake. There comes a moment in every empath's life when the quiet suffering becomes too heavy to bear, when the weight of carrying everyone else's emotions finally breaks something inside. And often, it doesn't happen with a dramatic explosion. It comes in silence. In the middle of the night, lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why you feel so empty when you give so much. Or it comes in the middle of a conversation, when you realize you are nodding and smiling, but inside you are screaming. It comes in the smallest, quietest moments, when you notice that you have disappeared from your own life. That realization is painful, because for so long, your identity has been built around being the one who understands, the one who listens, the one who saves. And when you begin to question that role, it feels like pulling the ground out from beneath your own feet. If I am not the caretaker, you wonder, then who am I? This is the beginning of the empath's awakening. The moment when the mask of endless giving begins to crack, and the true self starts to rise from beneath it. Jung spoke of individuation as the process of becoming whole, and for empaths, this is where it begins. By realizing that the role you have played is not the entirety of who you are. That beneath the layer of compassion, there is also a self longing to be seen, heard, and honored. At first, choosing yourself feels like betrayal. You fear you will disappoint the people who have come to rely on your endless patience. You fear you will lose love, or be rejected. And sometimes, those fears are not just in your imagination. Some people do resist. Some people who benefited from your self-sacrifice may push back, accusing you of being selfish or distant. This is the hardest part of the journey, because the temptation to return to old patterns is strong. But the truth is, when you begin to choose yourself, you are not betraying others, you are betraying the lie that your only value is in what you give away. You are breaking the chain of self-abandonment. You are stepping into authenticity. And though it is frightening, it is also the only path to freedom. As you walk this path, you begin to discover something you may have never truly experienced before: your own boundaries. And boundaries, for an empath, are not walls to keep people out. They are bridges that allow you to meet others without losing yourself. They are the invisible lines that say, "This is where I end, and you begin. This is what I can hold, and this is what I cannot." At first, boundaries feel unnatural. Every no that escapes your lips feels heavy, as if you are failing someone. But slowly, you realize that every no to others is also a yes to yourself. A yes to your well-being, your peace, your soul. And as you begin to honor those yes, you feel a new strength rising within you. And then comes the shadow. Jung called it the hidden part of ourselves we push away. For empaths, the shadow often holds all the emotions we have swallowed to keep the peace. The anger we never expressed. The grief we never shared. The desires we suppressed to be the perfect friend, the perfect child, the perfect partner. When you stop abandoning yourself, all of this begins to rise. And though it is uncomfortable, it is not here to destroy you. It is here to make you whole. Because you cannot live fully while rejecting parts of yourself. The shadow holds not only pain, but also strength. In your anger, there is the power to say no. In your grief, there is the courage to let go. In your desires, there is the spark of who you were always meant to become. And slowly, you begin to realize that choosing yourself is not selfish. It is sacred. It is the moment when the empath becomes not only a mirror of others, but a light for themselves. You begin to live differently. Your relationships shift. Some fade away, but the ones that remain become deeper, because they are no longer built on your self-erasure. They are built on truth. And the greatest shift of all is the way you feel inside. The exhaustion that once followed you everywhere begins to loosen its grip. The heaviness that weighed on your chest begins to lift. You start to breathe more freely. You feel a calmness, a steadiness, a presence you had not known before. Because now, you are no longer just reacting to everyone else. You are rooted in yourself. And here is the miracle: when you choose yourself, your empathy does not disappear. It becomes stronger. Because now, you give not from emptiness, but from fullness. You care not from obligation, but from freedom. You love not because you fear being unloved, but because it flows naturally from a soul that is finally whole. This is the Jungian awakening for empaths. The moment when you stop confusing sacrifice with love, silence with peace, being needed with being valued. The moment when you realize that true compassion must begin with yourself. And once you step into this truth, there is no going back. Because you have tasted what it means to live as both empath and individual, tender, but unbroken. There is a reason the path of the empath is both beautiful and painful. It begins long before adulthood, long before you even knew what the word empath meant. Think back to your earliest years. You were not just a child learning about the world, you were a child feeling the world. Every shift in your family's mood, every unspoken tension, every sigh and every silence landed in your small heart as if it were your responsibility to fix. When others were loud, you became quiet. When others were upset, you became careful. When others were broken, you became the glue. And because children make sense of the world through feeling rather than reason, you began to form a silent belief that love had to be earned through caretaking. That safety came only when you were pleasing, soothing, adjusting. That your value was tied not to who you were, but to how much you could absorb. This is where the empath's pattern begins. Not in adulthood, but in childhood, in the unspoken rules written deep inside you. Carl Jung would call this the beginning of the shadow. The parts of yourself you pushed down in order to survive. The loudness you silenced. The anger you swallowed. The needs you ignored. You buried them, not because they were unworthy, but because you thought they threatened love. And so, a split formed inside you. On the outside, the tender giver. On the inside, the silenced self. As adults, empaths repeat this pattern without even realizing it. You become the reliable friend, the patient partner, the employee who never says no. And in moments when your own needs rise up, the guilt comes flooding in. You hear the same old voice whispering, if you choose yourself, you will lose love. And so you give again, and again, and again. Until you are not living, you are only serving. But the awakening begins the moment you see this pattern for what it is. When you realize that the guilt you feel for saying no is not truth, it is conditioning. When you realize that the exhaustion you carry is not proof of your strength, it is proof of how long you have abandoned yourself. When you realize that the love you thought you had to earn was always yours to claim. This is where the healing of the inner child begins. Because inside every empath is that younger self who still believes they must shrink, bend, and sacrifice to be loved. And the only way forward is to return to that child within you, to sit with them in compassion, and whisper the words they never heard: you are enough as you are. You are safe even when you say no. You are loved even when you are not fixing anyone. At first, this healing feels foreign. Because for so many years, you have comforted others while neglecting your own pain. To turn inward to comfort yourself feels unnatural. But with practice, you begin to build a new relationship with your own heart. You begin to give yourself what you so freely gave away: patience, understanding, forgiveness, love. And as this healing deepens, something incredible happens. The guilt that once crushed you begins to loosen its hold. You no longer confuse boundaries with cruelty. You no longer confuse silence with rejection. You no longer confuse saying no with being unloving. You begin to see that love rooted in guilt is not love at all, it is control. And by releasing that guilt, you finally step into love that is free. And your relationships begin to shift. Some may resist, because they were comfortable with the version of you who always bent, always gave, always carried. But the relationships that remain become more honest, more balanced, more alive. Because now, you are no longer loved for what you can provide, You are loved for who you are. And perhaps the most profound shift of all is how you begin to experience your empathy. It is no longer a burden that leaves you drained. It becomes a gift that flows naturally. You still feel deeply, but you are no longer swallowed by what you feel. You can stand beside someone in pain without drowning in it. You can witness suffering without confusing it with your responsibility. You can love fully, while also loving yourself. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the process of becoming whole. For the empath, it is the journey of weaving back together all the parts you abandoned. The child who silenced their needs. The shadow that carried your unspoken emotions. The adult who finally learns to stand in both compassion and strength. Together, they become one. And when this happens, something beautiful is born. You begin to embody a presence that is both soft and unshakable. You no longer fear being called too sensitive, because you see sensitivity as your strength. You no longer chase love through sacrifice, because you know love begins within you. You no longer disappear in the weight of others, because you have discovered the ground of your own soul. This is the true awakening of the empath. Not the end of your sensitivity, but the beginning of your freedom. Not the closing of your heart, but the strengthening of it. Not the rejection of others, but the remembrance of yourself. And once you taste this truth, the world feels different. The same storms still rage around you, but you are no longer pulled into every current. You can feel without being consumed. You can love without being lost. You can finally walk in the world as who you were always meant to be, tender, compassionate, and whole. There comes a stage in the empath's journey when awareness alone is not enough. You see the patterns. You know the weight you carry is not fully yours. You recognize the moments you abandon yourself. But recognition without practice can still leave you stuck. This is where the real work begins, the daily, steady, often quiet practice of reclaiming your energy. Because energy is what defines an empath's life. You are sensitive not only to emotions, but to spaces, to voices, to silences, even to the subtle shifts most people never notice. And for years, your energy has been pulled outward, stretched thin like a thread trying to hold too much. To change this, you must begin learning to bring that thread back to yourself. The first step is awareness in real time. Imagine being in a conversation where someone's sadness begins to flood you. Instead of instantly absorbing it, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself softly, is this feeling mine or theirs? That question alone is revolutionary. Because for empaths, feelings blur. You forget where you end and the other begins. By pausing, you begin to untangle the knot. And when you realize the heaviness is not yours, you do not need to reject the person. You simply return the feeling back to its owner. This does not mean you are cold. It means you are compassionate without being consumed. It means you care without carrying. At first, this feels unnatural. But with practice, it becomes the foundation of emotional freedom. The second practice is creating space. Empaths often live without space because their lives are crowded with other people's needs. But silence, solitude, and rest are not luxuries for you, they are survival. Time alone is where you release what is not yours. Time and stillness is where you hear your own soul again. Without this space, you cannot thrive. So you begin carving it out, gently but firmly, as if your life depends on it, because it does. Then comes the body. Empaths often live in their hearts and minds, but forget their bodies. Yet your body is the anchor that keeps you grounded. Notice when your shoulders tighten, when your chest feels heavy, when your stomach knots. These are signals that you are carrying too much. Instead of ignoring them, you learn to listen. You stretch, you breathe, you move, you rest. This simple act of caring for your body is also caring for your soul. And slowly, you learn that boundaries are not just spoken, they are energetic. Your presence itself begins to communicate your limits. People feel it when you are no longer endlessly available. They sense it when you hold your energy close. And though some may resist, most begin to adjust, because your steadiness demands respect. This practice of reclaiming your energy does not mean you stop feeling. In fact, you feel more clearly. Because when you are not drowning in everyone else's emotions, you begin to feel your own. You rediscover what joy feels like when it is not overshadowed by guilt. You rediscover what peace feels like when it is not tied to fixing others. You rediscover what love feels like when it is not a transaction, but a natural flow from within. This is where the empath's sensitivity shifts from a burden into a power. Because your ability to feel is no longer scattered. It is focused. You can sense truth more easily. You can see through false words, false intentions, false connections. Your empathy becomes wisdom. Your compassion becomes strength. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as not just self-awareness, but self-realization. The empath's individuation is this: learning that your sensitivity is not here to destroy you. It is here to guide you. But only when you honor yourself first. Only when you allow your energy to belong to you. Only when you remember that you, too, are deserving of care. And as you practice this day by day, you begin to notice your life shifting in subtle but profound ways. You wake with less heaviness. You walk into rooms without feeling instantly drained. You engage in conversations without losing yourself in them. You begin to laugh more, breathe more, rest more. And for the first time, you realize that being an empath does not mean you are destined for suffering. It means you are destined for awareness, for depth, for connection, but only if you remain whole within yourself. And so, the empath who once lived only as a sponge, endlessly absorbing, becomes something far greater. A lighthouse. A steady flame. A presence that shines not because it is burning itself out, but because it is nourished, cared for, protected. A light that guides others without ever dimming itself. This is the deeper awakening, the moment you begin to live not as a burdened empath, but as an empowered one. Tender, but no longer broken. Sensitive, but no longer fragile. Connected, but no longer lost. And then comes the moment every empath longs for but rarely allows themselves to imagine. The moment when you finally realize that the life you have been dreaming of is not outside of you. It is within you. For so long, you have carried the weight of everyone else's pain, every unspoken word, every silent disappointment, every emotion that wasn't yours to hold. You have given endlessly, loved unconditionally, absorbed completely, and yet you often felt emptier for it. But now, that emptiness begins to transform into something vast, spacious, and luminous. You begin to understand that choosing yourself is not a one-time act, but a lifelong practice. It is waking each morning and deciding, quietly but firmly, that your energy, your heart, and your soul are yours to tend first. It is noticing, in every interaction, when you are absorbing what is not yours. When you are overextending to please. When your boundaries are being crossed because you have allowed them to be invisible. And it is gently, persistently, reclaiming that space, one moment at a time. And as you do, the world begins to change around you. Relationships that once drained you start to transform. Some people will leave, the ones who depended on your endless giving without gratitude. That is not loss, it is liberation. And the ones who remain, the friends, the partners, the family who respect and honor you, their love deepens, because it is no longer conditional on your self-erasure. You learn that you can be fully present, fully compassionate, and still remain intact. Work becomes different too. You no longer push yourself to exhaustion to prove worth. You no longer absorb every tension, every unspoken complaint, every subtle frustration. Instead, your sensitivity becomes a tool, a quiet guide that helps you navigate people, energy, and situations with clarity rather than chaos. You can engage fully without losing yourself. You can offer insight, support, and care without trading your peace for it. Your presence is steady, your voice is calm, your choices are deliberate. And for the first time, your work and life no longer leave you depleted. Within yourself, the transformation is even deeper. The child you silenced so long ago finally has a voice. The anger you buried, the grief you ignored, the longing you suppressed, all of it rises, not to destroy you, but to integrate. You cradle it, you witness it, you give it the space it was denied. And in doing so, you reclaim yourself. The shadow, once feared, becomes an ally. It guides you, strengthens you, and reminds you of your own wholeness. You begin to feel emotions differently. Not less, not muted, but without being consumed. You can sit with someone else's pain and not absorb it. You can witness suffering without carrying it. You can love without sacrificing yourself. Compassion becomes a choice rather than a burden. Sensitivity becomes a gift rather than a trap. You are no longer a mirror of the world's pain. You are a lighthouse, steady in the storm, shining without burning out. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, you notice freedom. Freedom in your body, shoulders lighter, chest less heavy, mind calmer. Freedom in your heart, no longer racing to fix, to soothe, to carry. Freedom in your soul, quiet, steady, anchored in your own truth. You breathe easier. You laugh more. You rest deeply. You no longer apologize for existing. You no longer diminish your voice to make others comfortable. You no longer confuse love with obligation, giving with self-worth, sacrifice with connection. This is the culmination of the empath's journey. The awakening Jung described not only as self-awareness, but as self-realization. The integration of child, shadow, and adult. The reclaiming of energy, boundaries, and voice. The understanding that your deepest gift, your empathy, reaches its truest power not when you are depleted, but when you are whole. And in this wholeness, life finally feels expansive. The storms around you still rage, but you are no longer pulled into every current. You can feel deeply without drowning. You can love fully without losing yourself. You can be tender without being weak. You can be present without being consumed. You can exist, truly, fully, beautifully exist, as the empath you were always meant to be. And then, perhaps most profoundly, you understand what it means to be human and sensitive in this world. Your heart, once fragile, is now steady. Your presence, once overlooked, is now luminous. Your love, once tangled in guilt, is now free. You have learned that the most courageous act an empath can take is to honor themselves. That the most radical love is the love you give yourself first. That the most profound freedom is the freedom to feel, to exist, and to live without sacrificing your soul. This is the life of an empath who has chosen themselves. Whole, radiant, awake, and unbroken. Tender, yes, but unshakable. Sensitive, yes, but empowered. Connected, yes, but free. You are no longer just surviving. You are thriving. You are no longer just existing. You are alive in every sense of the word. And for the first time, you feel the truth of it. You were never broken. You were always whole, waiting for the moment you remembered it.